Picture a railway depot outside New York in 1894. A traveler boards with a sealed box and instructions not to open it until he is safely home. Minutes earlier, he watched thousands of dollars in crisp notes counted before him. He was told the money was counterfeit, perfect enough to pass anywhere. He paid genuine cash for it. Now the train moves, the box opens, and there are only bricks or folded paper inside. Here is the paradox at the center of the green goods swindle. The counterfeit money was real. It had to be because the victim was allowed to inspect it. So how did authentic banknotes become the bait in a fraud that left almost no usable evidence? And why did the person who lost everything have powerful reasons to remain silent? Reed Waddell entered this history through reputation before he entered it through documentation. Newspapers of 1895 called him a notorious confidence man and closely associated his name with the gold brick fraud. 3 decades later, writer Herbert Asbury reported that Waddell had also moved into green goods after working the gold brick game. That later account is the basis for attaching his name to this scheme. It should not be mistaken for a surviving ledger or confession. None appears in the public sources used here. The firm claim is narrower. Waddell belonged to the professional confidence world in which green goods operated, and a later historian placed him directly in the trade. The trade itself is documented in exacting detail by police memoirs, sworn testimony, printed circulars, and a New York State Senate investigation. The approach began on paper. George W. Walling, a former New York police chief, described the sawdust swindle in his 1887 memoir. Circulars were mailed across the country, sometimes to merchants said to be in financial trouble. The sender claimed to hold nearly flawless counterfeit notes and invited the recipient to New York for an inspection. Walling reproduced the scale of the offer from a circular that reached police hands. $3,000 in supposed green goods could be bought for $200 in lawful cash. The price was not merely cheap. It was calibrated to make the recipient imagine an immediate escape from debt. The letter also performed a test. Anyone who replied had already accepted the premise that an illicit fortune could be purchased privately from a stranger. On June 14, 1894, George Appo explained the organization under oath to the New York State Senate Committee investigating the city police. Appo had worked as a steerer, the guide assigned to each customer. He named the other roles. A backer supplied capital. A writer mailed circulars and handled replies. A turner conducted the sale. A ringer waited behind a partition to exchange packages. A tailor watched the customer afterward. Appo estimated that 10,000 to 15,000 circulars could go out in a day. Even allowing for the perspective of one witness, the testimony shows a business designed for volume. Most letters could fail. The few recipients who answered by telegram paid for the whole apparatus. The con was not a chance encounter on a street. It was a sales funnel built from lists, print mail, rail, and carefully divided labor. The customer was rarely told to walk straight into a New York office. Appo testified that arrivals could be directed to hotels 50 or 100 miles away, naming Elizabeth, Poughkeepsie, and Fishkill among the rendezvous. A steerer traveled out to meet the stranger. Recognition depended on a password chosen for the occasion. One example was Speedy Fortune. The phrase made the meeting feel secret and controlled, while the distant hotel separated the customer from familiar witnesses. The steerer then brought him toward New York, waited in a saloon, and notified the operators that the customer had arrived. Every move narrowed the Traveler Euro-S choices. By the time he reached the selling room, he had followed several instructions, crossed jurisdictions, and placed his trust in the one person who appeared to know the route back out. The selling room was called the turning joint. Appo described an empty storefront furnished to resemble a modest office, with a desk and a partition. An older man might sit quietly as a figure of respectability. The turner then displayed between $5,000 and $10,000 in ones, fives, and tens. Every note was good money obtained from ordinary circulation. The operator represented it as counterfeit. That inversion solved the hardest problem in a counterfeit sale. The customer could handle the notes, compare them, and see nothing wrong because nothing was wrong. In Waddell Euro-S's version, a sample could even be spent at a nearby store without objection. The successful test did not prove the Seller Euro-S claim. It proved only that genuine currency behaves like genuine currency. The victim supplied the false conclusion himself. Once the price was agreed, the turner packed the genuine notes into a box and placed it on a shelf. Then came the physical trick. Appo said the customer was asked to write his name in a book. When the desk lid rose, it screened the shelf. Behind the partition, the ringer removed the box of cash and substituted a matching package containing paper or bricks. The customer received the substitute without seeing the exchange. The steerer carried it toward the depot, warning that federal detectives might be watching and that opening it too soon would be dangerous. This warning turned caution into custody. The customer protected the package from his own inspection. He boarded, the train moved, and the steerer stepped away. Only distance completed the trick. The evidence could be opened once the people who arranged it were gone. Apo-Euro-S testimony reads less like folklore than payroll. He said the writer and backer divided the main proceeds, while the steerer received 5%. The turner was paid $10 for each customer. The ringer and tailor received $5 each. The smallest deal, he said, was $300, supposedly buying $3,000 in notes. The structure rewarded specialization. Writers could send mail without meeting customers. Steerers could travel without controlling the money. The hidden ringer needed only seconds at the desk. A backer financed the genuine banknotes that created confidence and recovered them after every switch. The same display cash could therefore be shown again. What looked to the customer like a secret printing enterprise was actually a service business. Its inventory was ordinary money, briefly staged, then returned to the operator. The final safeguard was the victim-Euro-S own intention. Walling observed that a customer who complained would expose his attempt to buy counterfeit money. Apo described a more active form of pressure. If someone opened the box early or returned, a tailor could approach looking like an officer and tell him that he was as liable as the men who sold it. The safest course, the tailor advised, was to leave on the next train. Whether or not that warning stated the law precisely was almost beside the point. It sounded plausible to a frightened person carrying a box acquired in secret. Shame, fear, and uncertainty did work that locks could not. The green goods men had arranged a fraud in which the person best able to identify them had reasons to avoid a police station, a courtroom, and the local newspaper. Silence alone does not explain the Trade-Euro-S scale. The 1895 report of the New York State Senate Committee said green goods operators worked under police protection. Its conclusion was blunt. The traffic extended across the country and depended on help or protection connected with police, postal, and telegraph systems. Witnesses described regular payments for protection. When a customer complained, the report said detectives could demand part of the recovered money. Apo testified that police saw steerers with customers and did not stop them. His account was evidence from a participant, not a neutral observer, but the committee said it found abundant corroboration. This changed the economics of the swindle. Protection did more than prevent arrest. It made official authority part of the atmosphere that frightened customers, guarded routes, and discouraged complaints. Waddell Euro-Ets own trail ends far from the rooms described by Apo. Period newspapers reported that Tom Owa Euro-Ebrian shot him at the Northern Railway Station in Paris on March 27, 1895. Contemporary coverage identified Waddell chiefly with the gold brick swindle. Asbury later wrote that Waddell had added green goods to his repertoire and extended his operations to Europe. Accounts differed about the quarrel that preceded the shooting, variously emphasizing money or a personal dispute. The safe conclusion is the smallest one. Waddell, a documented confidence man later linked to green goods, was shot by Owa Euro-Ebrian at a Paris station on that date. His death supplied newspapers with a dramatic ending, but it did not produce a full accounting of his earlier work. No recovered client list or balance sheet settles how large his green goods role actually was. The scheme did not depend on Waddell, and it did not end with a hearing. A pamphlet published in 1895, Counterfeit Money, collected the Lexow revelations and reprinted reporting from the New York Herald. It said operators had temporarily retreated to Jersey City while witnesses testified, yet customers continued arriving and packages of rubbish continued moving outward. The detail is important even if treated as contemporary reporting rather than account. A distributed fraud can survive the loss of one room or one operator. The mailing list remains. The writer changes an address. The steerer chooses another hotel. The turning joint moves across a river. Green goods used the modern systems of its age, cheap printing, national mail, telegraph messages, and rail travel, while exploiting the gaps between the authorities responsible for each one. Return to the traveler at the depot. The box opens after the train has begun to move. What falls out may be brick, sawdust, or folded paper. The exact filling varies across accounts because the filling was never the point. The package only had to preserve weight and delay discovery. The real machinery was elsewhere, in the circular, the password, the genuine notes, the partition, the warning, and the expectation of silence. Reed Waddell survives at the edge of that machinery, named by a later chronicler, and fixed more securely in period reports of other swindles and his death. The green goods system survives more clearly. Walling described it. Apo mapped it under oath. A Senate committee recorded the protection around it. The victim Euro-S name may be gone, but the public record still preserves the route of the box.